The night I thought everything was lost began with a single alarm. The wind howled across the Kentucky Horse Ranch just after midnight, carrying the scent of smoke through the cold spring air. Lights flashed in the distance. Horses stirred nervously inside their stalls. Workers ran across the property, shouting instructions over the noise. Even now, years later, I can still remember the feeling in my chest when someone said the words I never wanted to hear. The foal was missing. I stepped out onto the porch of the main stable and stared toward the far end of the ranch. Emergency vehicles were arriving. Their lights painted the darkness in red and white flashes. Employees moved quickly between buildings, making sure every animal was safe. Most of the horses had already been guided away from the affected area, but one was unaccounted for. A young foal barely 6 months old. Small, curious, too young to understand danger. My stomach tightened. The colt had been born during a difficult season. Against the odds, he survived complications that many believed would take his life before it truly began. Over time, he became more than just another horse on the ranch. Everyone knew him. Everyone cared about him, especially me. We searched every nearby paddock, one ranch manager told me. We cannot find him anywhere. I looked toward the dark fields beyond the stable. Wind bent the grass beneath the moonlight. The property stretched for hundreds of acres. Too many places for a frightened animal to disappear. Keep looking, I said. Do not stop. The manager nodded and hurried away. Around me, the night continued moving at a frantic pace. Yet somehow, everything felt strangely distant. I found myself staring toward the empty stall where the foal should have been. Hours seemed to pass. The emergency crews eventually confirmed that the situation was under control. The immediate danger had passed. Most of the horses were safe, but the missing foal remained missing. By 3 o'clock in the morning, exhaustion covered the ranch like a heavy blanket. Workers gathered near the main barn, exchanging worried looks. Nobody wanted to say what everyone was thinking. If the foal had run far enough into the surrounding countryside, finding him before sunrise would be almost impossible. I refused to accept that. As dawn approached, I walked into the security office and requested every camera recording from the property. If there was an answer, I intended to find it. The monitors illuminated the dark room in shades of blue and gray. Hour after hour of footage played across the screens. Horses, employees, trucks, shadows, nothing useful. Then one camera captured something unexpected. I leaned closer immediately. Near the edge of the property, moments before the confusion reached its peak, a figure appeared. A young woman. She wore a faded jacket and work boots. Her blonde hair moved wildly in the wind. She was not an employee. I would have remembered her. More importantly, she was not running away from the ranch. She was leading the missing foal through a side gate and toward the open fields beyond the property. The room fell silent. My pulse quickened. Every person watching the footage exchanged confused looks. The young woman glanced back once before disappearing into the darkness with the foal beside her. Nobody knew who she was. Nobody knew why she was there. But one thing became clear immediately. The foal had not vanished on his own. And somewhere beyond the ranch, there was a girl carrying a secret that was about to change both of our lives. The image of the young woman stayed on the screen long after everyone else left the security office. Dawn painted the Kentucky countryside in soft shades of gold and gray. Outside, ranch workers continued searching the surrounding fields, but my attention remained fixed on the frozen frame from the camera footage. The blonde woman was leading the foal with surprising confidence. Not pulling, not chasing, guiding him. The frightened animal seemed calm beside her. That detail bothered me more than anything else. Horses trusted people for a reason, especially young horses. Something about her presence had made him follow willingly. By 8 o'clock that morning, I had watched the recording at least 20 times. The same questions repeated themselves. Who was she? Why had she been on my property? And most importantly, where had she taken the foal? One of my ranch managers entered the office carrying a cup of coffee. We searched the northern fields, he said. Nothing yet. I nodded but barely heard him. My attention remained on the monitor. Zoom in, I said. A technician enlarged the footage. The quality was poor. Wind shook the camera. Shadows blurred the details. Yet one thing became visible. A small patch stitched onto the sleeve of the woman's faded jacket. The shape resembled a paw print. Pause it there. Everyone leaned closer. The technician adjusted the image again. The patch was still difficult to see, but now I recognized it. It belonged to a local animal rescue organization nearly 20 miles from the ranch. My pulse quickened. Finally, a lead. Less than an hour later, I was driving toward the rescue center myself. Rolling fields stretched across both sides of the road. The spring air felt fresh after the chaos of the previous night. Yet my thoughts remained focused on the mysterious woman. If she had stolen the foal, why take him somewhere connected to animal welfare? None of it made sense. The rescue center sat on a quiet piece of land outside a small town. The building was modest. Weathered fences surrounded several outdoor enclosures. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. Volunteers moved between buildings carrying supplies. It looked nothing like the luxury horse ranch I owned. Yet there was something honest about the place. The moment I stepped out of my vehicle, an older woman approached with a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. I introduced myself and showed her a printed image from the security footage. The smile faded into recognition almost immediately. "That is Hannah." My heart skipped. Finally, a name. "Do you know where she is?" The woman nodded. "She has been here since sunrise." Confusion washed over me. Sunrise? If Hannah had taken the foal during the night, how had she arrived here so quickly? Before I could ask another question, movement near one of the barns caught my attention. I turned toward the sound, and there she was. The same blonde hair, the same worn jacket, the same calm presence. Hannah Brooks stood beside a fenced pasture several hundred feet away, and standing beside her was the missing foal. Healthy, safe, peacefully eating grass beneath the morning sun. For several seconds, I simply stared. Relief flooded through me so suddenly that I almost laughed. The foal was alive. But as Hannah reached down to gently stroke his neck, another realization settled in. The look on her face was not the expression of someone hiding a secret. It was the expression of someone protecting one. The foal lifted his head the moment he saw me. Sunlight spilled across the pasture, turning his chestnut coat almost golden. For the first time since the previous night, I could breathe normally. He was safe, healthy, completely unharmed. Relief settled over me like a weight finally being lifted from my shoulders. Yet my attention quickly shifted back to the young woman standing beside him. Hannah Brooks gently scratched the foal behind one ear, and the animal leaned toward her as though they had known each other for years. It was a level of trust that horses rarely gave away so easily. She looked up when she noticed me approaching. Her blue-gray eyes widened slightly, not with fear, more with surprise, as if she had expected someone from the ranch eventually, but not this soon. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The spring breeze moved through the pasture, carrying the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Somewhere nearby, dogs barked happily behind one of the rescue buildings. It felt impossible that only hours earlier everyone had been searching desperately through darkness. "You are Ethan Moretti," she said quietly. I nodded. "And you are Hannah Brooks." A faint smile touched her face. "I suppose we have both been introduced." Her calmness caught me off guard. Most people became nervous around me. Hannah simply looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from helping others more than yourself. I glanced toward the foal. "You took him from the ranch." She looked down at the young horse before answering. "I did." The honesty surprised me. No excuses. No hesitation. Just the truth. "Why?" For a moment, Hannah remained silent. Then she pointed toward the distant hills beyond the rescue center. "Because he was frightened." I frowned slightly. "All the horses were frightened." She nodded. "Yes, but he was trapped near a damaged section of fencing. The others moved away. He did not." Her eyes drifted toward the foal. By the time I reached him, the workers were focused on moving the larger horses. Nobody saw him. I listened carefully. Everything she said matched what I had seen in the footage. "You could have left him there and informed someone." Hannah gave a small laugh. Not disrespectful, just tired. There was not time for that. The answer stayed with me. She was right. In moments of uncertainty, people do not always have the luxury of waiting for perfect solutions. Sometimes they simply act. I looked around the rescue center. Weathered fences, modest barns, volunteers carrying supplies between buildings. Nothing about the place suggested wealth. Yet it radiated compassion, the kind that could not be purchased. "Why bring him here?" I asked. Hannah gently rested her hand against the foal's neck. "Because I knew he would be safe." Her voice softened. "And because I knew someone would come looking for him." The simplicity of her answer struck me harder than I expected. She had not taken the foal for money. She had not hidden him. She had protected him. That was all. The older woman from the rescue center approached carrying a bucket of feed. As she passed, I noticed several rescued animals nearby. Injured dogs, abandoned cats, elderly horses. Every enclosure seemed full. You work here every day? I asked. Hannah smiled. Whenever they need help. The woman beside us laughed warmly. She says help. We call it saving the place. Hannah immediately looked embarrassed. But as I watched volunteers greet her by name and animals gather near her whenever she walked past, one thing became impossible to ignore. This was not someone seeking recognition. This was someone who quietly gave everything she had. And standing there in the morning sunlight, I realized the greatest mystery was no longer why Hannah had rescued the foal. The real mystery was how someone with so little could still find so much kindness to give. I expected Hannah to ask for something before I left the rescue center that afternoon. Money, recognition, a reward. Most people would have. Instead, she surprised me again. The foal had already been loaded into a transport trailer that would return him safely to the ranch. Volunteers gathered nearby, smiling as they watched him nibble hay without a care in the world. The crisis was over. Everything had worked out. Yet Hannah seemed far more interested in cleaning animal enclosures than discussing what had happened. You should at least let me thank you properly, I said as we walked along a gravel path beside the pasture. She looked up from the bucket she was carrying and smiled politely. You already did. I frowned. How? You came for him. The answer caught me off guard. Hannah glanced toward the trailer where the young horse waited. A lot of animals do not get that kind of loyalty. The word stayed with me. Loyalty. Most people associated that word with business or power. Hannah associated it with compassion. We stopped near one of the smaller paddocks where an elderly rescue horse rested beneath a shade tree. The animal moved slowly, its age visible in every step. Hannah immediately walked over and checked its water bucket. The horse nudged her shoulder affectionately. She laughed softly and scratched behind its ears. It was such a simple moment. Yet somehow it revealed more about her character than any conversation could. The rescue center struggles financially, does it not? I asked. Hannah gave a small shrug. Most rescue centers do. You could use help. She looked directly at me. The animals need help. There was a difference. A very important difference. I noticed it immediately. Hannah never talked about herself. Every answer led back to someone else. An animal. A volunteer. A neighbor. Anyone but her. The older director of the center joined us carrying paperwork. You have no idea how lucky we are to have Hannah, she said. Hannah looked embarrassed again. Please do not start. The director laughed. It is true. She turned toward me. Last winter she spent nearly every weekend here, helping rebuild shelters after a storm. She even used her own savings to buy supplies. Hannah quickly changed the subject, but the information stayed with me. Her own savings. Looking around the modest facility, I doubted those savings had been substantial. Yet she had given them anyway. Later that afternoon, as I prepared to leave, I walked toward my vehicle. Hannah remained near the paddocks, helping volunteers organize feed deliveries. The rescue center director approached me one last time. Can I tell you something? She asked quietly. I nodded. She thinks nobody notices how hard she works. Her expression softened. But without Hannah, this place would probably be gone. I looked back toward the young woman standing beside the fence. The sunlight illuminated strands of blonde hair moving in the breeze. She was laughing at something one of the volunteers said. For the first time all day, she looked completely happy. Not because anyone praised her. Not because she received recognition. Simply because she was helping. As my driver pulled away from the rescue center, I found myself thinking about a woman who had risked nothing for herself and everything for a frightened animal. And for reasons I could not fully explain, one question refused to leave my mind. If Hannah Brooks cared this much about everyone else, who was taking care of her? Over the next several days, I told myself I had more important things to focus on. The ranch needed repairs. Meetings filled my calendar. Business demands never seemed to slow down. Yet no matter how busy I became, my thoughts kept returning to Hannah Brooks. I remembered the way she spoke about animals before herself. I remembered the worn jacket she wore despite the chilly weather. Most of all, I remembered how quickly she dismissed any recognition for what she had done. People usually wanted something. Hannah seemed to want nothing at all. One afternoon, I found myself driving back to the rescue center without planning to. The spring sun hung high above the Kentucky countryside. Fresh green fields stretched toward the horizon. As my vehicle approached the familiar gravel road, I noticed several volunteers working outside. Hannah was among them. She was kneeling beside an older dog, carefully wrapping a protective bandage around its injured paw. The dog remained completely calm, trusting her without hesitation. I watched for a moment before stepping out of the vehicle. Hannah looked up and smiled when she saw me. "You came back." There was no surprise in her voice, only kindness. "I had business nearby," I replied. The excuse sounded weak even to me. Hannah laughed softly, but chose not to challenge it. We spent the afternoon walking through the rescue center together. She introduced me to nearly every animal on the property. Some had been abandoned. Others had been rescued from difficult situations. Each one had a story. And somehow, Hannah remembered them all. Their names, their habits, their fears, their favorite treats. It amazed me. Near sunset, we stopped beside a small paddock where a young rescue horse grazed peacefully. The golden light painted everything in warm colors. For the first time all day, Hannah seemed unusually quiet. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. She hesitated before answering. "Nothing important." I looked at her. "I doubt that." A faint smile appeared. Then she sighed. "When I was younger, I wanted to work with horses full-time." The admission surprised me. "What changed?" Hannah rested her arms on the wooden fence. "Life." There was no bitterness in the answer, just acceptance. She explained how college had become financially impossible after family hardships. She took jobs wherever she could find them. Bills came first. Dreams came later. Eventually, later never arrived. I listened without interrupting. The story felt familiar. Not because our lives were similar. They were not. But because I recognized what it sounded like when someone quietly sacrificed their own future. "Do you still want it?" I asked. Hannah looked toward the pasture. The setting sun reflected in her eyes. Every day, the honesty in her voice hit harder than she realized. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The breeze moved gently through the grass around us. Somewhere in the distance, one of the rescue dogs barked happily. Then Hannah smiled and shrugged. "It is fine. Some dreams belong to younger versions of ourselves." She said it lightly, as though she truly believed it. But I did not. As I drove away later that evening, her words stayed with me. Some dreams belong to younger versions of ourselves. I glanced at the passenger seat where a brochure from a nationally respected equine training academy rested beside me. The program was one of the best in the country. Expensive, competitive, nearly impossible to enter without support. And for the first time in years, I found myself making a decision that had nothing to do with business. Because I had just discovered the one thing Hannah Brooks wanted for herself. And I could not stop thinking about it. The brochure remained on my desk for nearly a week. Every morning I saw it. Every evening I looked at it again before leaving the office. The Equine Training Academy accepted only a small number of students each year. Graduates went on to work at some of the most respected horse facilities in the country. For someone like Hannah, it was more than a school. It was the future she thought she had lost. Yet the more I considered helping her, the more I understood something important. Hannah would never accept charity. Not directly. Pride was not the right word. Dignity was. She had built her entire life around earning every opportunity through hard work. If she succeeded, it had to be because she deserved it, not because someone handed it to her. One afternoon, I called an old friend who sat on the Academy's advisory board. We talked for nearly an hour. I asked questions about admissions, scholarship programs, volunteer recommendations, internship placements. By the time the conversation ended, an idea had begun to form. A fair opportunity. Nothing more. Nothing less. Meanwhile, life at the rescue center continued as usual. Hannah spent her days caring for animals, repairing fences, organizing supplies, and helping anyone who needed assistance. The director later told me that Hannah often arrived before sunrise and stayed long after everyone else went home. Not because she was required to, because she cared. Several days later, I visited the rescue center again. The afternoon sun illuminated the rolling hills surrounding the property. Volunteers were preparing for a community fundraiser. Tables were being arranged. Decorations hung from fences. Families wandered through the grounds meeting rescued animals. Hannah stood near a small paddock helping children feed carrots to one of the older horses. The smile on her face appeared effortless, genuine, the kind that cannot be purchased. As I watched her, I noticed something else. The children listened to her. The animals trusted her. The volunteers relied on her. She possessed a natural ability that no classroom could teach. People felt safe around her. Eventually, Hannah walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me without asking whether I wanted it. Somehow she already knew the answer. "You seem distracted today," she said. I laughed quietly. "Do I?" She nodded. "A little." For a moment, I considered telling her everything. The academy, the conversations, the possibilities. Instead, I simply asked, "If you could do anything tomorrow, what would it be?" Hannah looked toward the horses grazing nearby. The answer came immediately. "Learn." Her voice softened. "There is still so much I want to know." The simplicity of that answer affected me more than she realized. Most people dream about possessions. Hannah dreamed about knowledge, about becoming better at helping others. Later that evening, after leaving the rescue center, I opened my email and found the message I had been waiting for. The academy had reviewed Hannah's volunteer history, recommendations, and community service record. They were impressed. Very impressed. Attached to the email was an invitation for a formal scholarship interview. My pulse quickened as I read the details. This was real now. A genuine opportunity. One she had earned entirely on her own merits. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time all day. Then I looked out the window toward the dark Kentucky countryside and thought about a young woman who believed some dreams belonged in the past. Because in a few days, Hannah Brooks was about to discover that her future had not forgotten her. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning. Hannah almost missed it. The rescue center received dozens of letters every week from donors, volunteers, and local organizations. Most were routine. This one was different. It carried the seal of the Equine Training Academy she had admired since she was a teenager. The moment she saw the logo, her hands froze. Sunlight streamed through the office window as she carefully opened the envelope. Around her, volunteers moved in and out of the building carrying supplies and paperwork. The normal rhythm of the rescue center continued. Yet for Hannah, the world suddenly felt very quiet. Her eyes moved across the page once, then again, then a third time. She could not believe what she was reading. An invitation, a scholarship interview, a chance to compete for a place in one of the most respected equine programs in the country. Her heart raced. For several seconds, she simply stared at the letter. The dream she had buried years ago was suddenly sitting in her hands. The rescue center director found her standing motionless near the desk. "Hannah," she asked, "are you all right?" Hannah handed her the letter without speaking. The director read it quickly and immediately covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my goodness." Volunteers nearby turned toward them. Within minutes, everyone in the room knew. Smiles spread across faces. Congratulations echoed through the building. Yet beneath the excitement, Hannah felt something else. Fear. Not fear of failure. Fear of hope. Hope was dangerous when you had spent years teaching yourself not to expect too much. Later that afternoon, she drove to the ranch. The young foal grazed peacefully in a large pasture beneath clear blue skies. Hannah often visited him when her schedule allowed. Seeing him always reminded her how quickly life could change. Ethan was standing near the fence when she arrived. The wind moved through the grass around them. Horses wandered across distant fields. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Hannah held up the envelope. "I got it." A smile appeared on Ethan's face immediately. Genuine. Proud. "I know." Hannah laughed softly. "Of course you do." They walked slowly along the fence line together. The foal trotted across the pasture before stopping near them. Hannah reached out and stroked his neck. "I still cannot believe it." Ethan looked toward the horizon. "You should." She studied him for a moment. "Did you have something to do with this?" The question hung in the air between them. Ethan did not answer immediately. Finally, he shook his head. "The invitation belongs to you." His voice was calm. "Everything in that file was earned by your work, your reputation, and the people whose lives you have helped." Hannah looked down at the letter again. Deep inside, she knew he was telling the truth. Whatever support had happened behind the scenes, the opportunity itself existed because of years of effort nobody had noticed. Years of sacrifice. Years of choosing kindness when nobody was watching. The realization brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She quickly looked away. Ethan pretended not to notice. Sometimes respect appears in the form of silence. As the sun began to set across the Kentucky countryside, Hannah folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future larger than survival. And standing beside the pasture, watching a once-lost foal run freely across the field, she realized something extraordinary. The night she thought she was rescuing an animal, she may have unknowingly rescued her own dream as well. The scholarship interview took place 3 weeks later. Hannah barely slept the night before. She spent hours reviewing notes, studying training methods, and reading everything she could find about the academy. By sunrise, she was already awake, sitting at her small kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Outside her apartment window, the world looked ordinary. Inside, her heart felt anything but. This was the opportunity she had dreamed about for years. Not because it promised money or status, because it represented purpose. The chance to dedicate her life to something she truly loved. When she arrived at the academy, the campus was even more impressive than she imagined. Large training arenas stretched across rolling green hills. Horses moved gracefully through fenced paddocks. Students worked alongside experienced trainers beneath the warm summer sun. Hannah felt both inspired and intimidated. She reminded herself to breathe. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Questions came from every direction. Animal behavior, equine health, rescue experience, long-term goals. Hannah answered honestly. She spoke about the rescue center, about abandoned animals, about the young foal who had reminded her why compassion mattered. She never tried to impress anyone. She simply told the truth. By the time the interview ended, she felt exhausted. Yet she also felt proud. For the first time, she had given herself permission to believe she belonged in a room like that. Days passed, then a week. The waiting became almost unbearable. Hannah threw herself into work at the rescue center to distract herself. She cleaned stalls, organized donations, helped with veterinary appointments. Anything to keep her mind occupied. Ethan visited occasionally during that time. Neither of them discussed the academy very much. Somehow, he seemed to understand that the uncertainty was difficult enough without constant reminders. One warm afternoon, a delivery truck pulled into the rescue center parking lot. The driver stepped out carrying a large envelope. Hannah immediately recognized the academy seal. Her pulse quickened. Volunteers gathered around her as she carefully opened it. The entire rescue center seemed to hold its breath. Her eyes moved across the first paragraph, then the second. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes. The director grabbed her arm. "What does it say?" Hannah looked up, speechless. For a moment she could not answer. Then she laughed through her tears. "I got in." Cheers erupted around her. Volunteers hugged one another. Someone began clapping. Several rescue dogs barked excitedly as if they understood the celebration. Hannah covered her face and cried openly. Not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that a dream she had buried years earlier was finally becoming real. That evening, she drove to the ranch. The sky glowed orange and gold as the sun settled beyond the Kentucky hills. Ethan stood near the pasture watching the foal, who was now larger, stronger, and full of energy. Hannah walked toward him carrying the acceptance letter. She did not need to say a word. The smile on her face told him everything. Ethan looked at the letter and nodded slowly. Pride shone in his eyes. "Congratulations." Hannah laughed. "I still cannot believe it." For several moments, they stood together watching the young horse run through the field. Then Hannah turned toward him. "You knew this would happen before I did not you?" Ethan smiled, but said nothing. The silence was answer enough. Hannah shook her head and laughed again. Yet deep inside, she understood something important. Ethan had never tried to change her life by giving her something she had not earned. He had simply reminded her that she was capable of more than she believed. And standing beneath the golden evening sky, Hannah realized that some people enter your life not to rescue you, but to help you recognize the strength that was already there all along. Summer slowly gave way to autumn. The academy program challenged Hannah in ways she never expected. Long days began before sunrise and often ended long after dark. There were lessons to learn, horses to train, and skills to master. Yet she embraced every moment of it. For the first time in years, she was no longer surviving day by day. She was building a future. Months passed. The rescue center remained an important part of her life, and she returned whenever her schedule allowed. The volunteers greeted her like family. The animals remembered her. So did one particular young horse. The foal had grown remarkably since the night everything began. Stronger, faster, more confident. Every time Hannah visited the ranch, He trotted toward the fence as though greeting an old friend. Ethan always seemed to notice. One crisp autumn evening, Hannah arrived at the ranch just before sunset. Golden light rolled across the Kentucky hills. Leaves drifted through the cool air. The entire property seemed peaceful in a way she had never fully appreciated before. Ethan stood near the pasture watching the horses move through the fading light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood together listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into evening. The foal galloped across the field before slowing to a graceful walk. Hannah smiled. He looks completely different now. Ethan nodded. So do you? She laughed softly. I'm not sure about that. I am. His voice carried the quiet certainty she had come to recognize. Hannah looked out toward the horizon. The academy had changed her life, but not in the way she expected. She had gained knowledge and experience. Yet the greatest change was confidence. For the first time, she trusted herself. The realization felt both new and familiar. I used to think one moment changed everything, she said quietly. Ethan glanced toward her. And now? Hannah smiled. Now I think it is the small choices that matter most. The wind moved gently through the pasture grass. Somewhere nearby, horses shifted comfortably in their fields. Ethan looked toward the young horse grazing peacefully beneath the golden sky. A small choice can change a life. Hannah followed his gaze. She knew exactly what he meant. One decision on one difficult night had connected two completely different worlds. Neither of them could have predicted where it would lead. As the sun slipped lower, ranch staff began preparing for the evening. Lights appeared across the property one by one. The scene felt warm and familiar, like a place where people belonged. Hannah reached into her bag and removed a framed photograph. It showed the foal standing proudly in the pasture, healthy and strong. Several rescued animals from the center appeared in the background. She handed it to Ethan. For your office. Ethan studied the picture carefully before smiling. Thank you. It was a simple exchange. Yet somehow it carried the weight of everything that had happened. The fear, the uncertainty, the hope, the growth. They stood together for a while longer, watching the last light disappear beyond the hills. Neither felt the need to fill the silence. Some connections do not require constant words. Eventually, Hannah turned toward the ranch house. Ethan walked beside her. The path ahead was still unwritten. There would be new challenges, new dreams, and new opportunities waiting for both of them. But neither seemed afraid of the future anymore. Because sometimes the greatest gift is not being rescued. Sometimes the greatest gift is discovering that kindness has the power to lead you exactly where you were meant to be. And on a quiet Kentucky evening, beneath a sky painted gold by the setting sun, two lives continued forward because one young woman chose courage when nobody was watching.